Welcome back! Now in the last video we put together the fire particle effect, which is looking pretty nice. It's a convincing fire, you can tell what it is, but it just feels like something's missing.
Yeah, it's kind of quiet out there.
Yeah, it'd be nice if the fire had a bit of a sound, something like some crackle and some pop. Now, we've already got a sound effect that we're going to be using, but in this video I'd like to show you how to get that into Unity, and to do that you need to understand a little bit about how Unity handles sound. So first off, I'm going to come over to the hierarchy view in the lower left hand corner, and we're going to pick on the first person controller. I'll expand that, and inside of this I'm going to select the main camera. Now, inside of the inspector panel for the main camera, we can see all of the cool properties that make the camera behave the way it does. There's its transforms for its position, there's all the little camera settings for its field of view and whatnot. But at the very bottom, we have all of the various components that are bolted onto this camera, and the bottommost one is an audio listener. This is going to be in place with all of your cameras. As a matter of fact, if you're using multiple cameras, you have to often take the extra ones off because you're only allowed one audio listener in your games. And the audio listener is exactly that. It's kind of like your ear into the world. If the camera itself can be thought of as your eyes to allow you to see the world, then the audio listener is going to be your ears, allowing you to hear what's going on. The counterpart to the audio listener is the audio source component. An audio source is kind of like a little speaker that you can attach to any game object in your level, in your scene, and put sound effects inside of it, and those sound effects will play, they'll be received by the audio listener, and they'll go out to your computer speakers so that you can hear them and revel in the awesomeness of your audio. So let's take a look at how this is done. Now again, we've got our audio listener in place. We don't have to worry about that. We just need to make a source. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this. What I'm going to do though is just take the flame game object here, which is really the conglomeration of the various particle systems and the light. And I'm not going to add this, but I want to show you. We can come up to the component menu, go underneath audio, and we could attach an audio source directly to this flame game object if we wanted to.
Right, because it is a component, anything that is in your hierarchy, this can be added to.
That's right. We can add an audio source to everything. We could add one to the camp. We could add one to the sun if we really wanted to, though I don't really know what that would prove. Well,
I don't know. If we actually heard this on, I think we'd be in some serious trouble.
A really interesting phenomenon. Anyway, what we're going to do is create an empty game object, and this game object will more or less only contain our audio source. So let's start off by going to the game object menu and choose create empty. Alternatively, you can hit Control-Shift-N, as you can see here, and this makes an empty game object, which is just named game object. Now when you select a game object, the only thing it has is its transform component. This is kind of a necessity. This is a requirement for all game objects. It just gives it a position in space, and we need that. The first thing, before we add any other components to it, I want to rename this. So we'll press F2, and we will call this Fire Sound. Now currently, again, it's just an empty game object. It does nothing. It has no functionality whatsoever. We're now going to give it functionality by adding on the audio source component. So with the Fire Sound game object selected, I'll go under Component, jump down to Audio, and click on Audio Source. Pow! There we go. We now have an audio source. It's kind of like we've just taken a little tiny speaker and we've taped it to the side of this kind of benign little thing. But the speaker doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any sounds in it. It's kind of like an iPod or an MP3 player that has no songs loaded onto it. So what we need to do is load up a sound file. Now there's a couple of different ways to do this, and we've already taken a look at one way, which is to go under our Assets menu and jump down to Import New Asset, and then point at some folder. That works, and that's cool, but I'm going to close this. And instead, I am going to show you another way to go about this, which is if you have a window open in your browser, and here we have all sorts of various sources. In fact, this is the same thing that I just opened a second ago, same window. I can take my Fire 1 MP3, which is the sound effect that I was going to import through the Assets menu, and I can drag this right into my project folder. But currently I have no place to drag this. So what I'm going to do is create a brand new folder for it. Let's go to Create, Folder. Again, it's a new kind of asset, so we're going to make a brand new folder to contain that, keep everything nice and organized. So let's press F2 and we'll call this Audio, like so. Now let's go back to our window, and we'll drag fire1.mp3 into our audio folder. And immediately it starts importing. So dragging and dropping is supported. If you don't want to go up under your menus and actually dig down and find things, if you already have it open, you can drag it right in, and Unity will take care of the rest. And there we go. So now let's grab our fire sound object. Let's take a look at its properties. Now, I'm not going to go over every single property right now at the moment. We're going to set the ones that we need, and then later on in future videos over the audio system components in general, we'll talk about all these properties, how they work, and what they do. But the first one is our audio clip property, and this is a reference to an actual sound. If I expand our audio folder here in the project view, we can see Fire 1 has now been imported, and I'm just going to drag this right up here to the audio clip and let go. Technically, we're done already. Now, I am going to rotate around in the view for just a moment and make sure that I know exactly where this is placed. Sometimes when you just drop objects into the view, you can't really tell exactly where they are. But this looks like it's positioned pretty much right in the fire. We could tweak it a little more. Make sure you have your move tool selected with the W key and slide this right to the center of the fire. Maybe up a little higher if you felt like it, but it's not going to matter too much. Now, let's give this a test. I'm going to hit play. And we can hear some fire.
Yay. Now it's not silent anymore.
That's right. We have the sound of fire popping and crackling.
Now, is the sound changing?
It is a little bit, and I was going to point that out. Notice as we get further away, the sound gets quieter. And that's because this is a 3D sound. It is respected by the 3D engine. It can be spatialized. It will pan from your left speaker to your right speaker as you rotate around. And now you're not going to be able to pick that up on the video, unfortunately. We don't record these in stereo. But if you're playing with this in Unity on your own, you will notice that you have full three-dimensional aspect in your sound as you move around in your level, which is great. Let's control that a little bit, though, just to show you a few things. We can change the overall volume of the sound. We can change its pitch. Now, if you thought that, when you're standing right on it, that was a little bit loud, we could, say, for instance, pull the volume down to about half of what it was. We also have the ability to control things like the distance at which we're going to fade off. Now, without getting too far into everything you're looking at, what you see here inside this window in your inspector is a graph demonstrating the fall off of the sound as you move away from it. And the cool thing is this will update in real time as you play the game. So watch over here in the inspector on the right hand side of the screen as I hit play, and when I'm right on top of the sound, we can of course hear it. And then as I get far away, not only do we lose it, but take a look at that graph over in the inspector. It's actually graphing out our distance and showing us how the audio is dropping off, which is extremely useful. But because the distances that we're using are pretty far, and right now the max distance at which we should get all the way down to 0 is 500 yards away.
Right, and in our world, where it's only 256 meters across, technically you could be on the other side of the level and you would still hear the fire. Just a very little bit, but it would be there.
But it would be there, that's right. So I'm going to take the max distance, and we're going to pull this down to only about 20 units, or 20 yards. Or did I say yards earlier? Yes. I meant to say meters. My brain clicked over to the imperial system for no real reason other than American.
That's what
I guess
you've been trained to use.
Yeah,
all your life.
It's where my brain lies. All right, so we'll switch that down to 20, and now as I back away, we drop off. And you can actually see that reflected in the graph. Now the cool thing about that, without, again, getting too far into things, is we can change that roll-off mode. We can go to a linear model, where it's kind of a one-to-one relationship as you back away, or even to a custom roll-off, where we can start changing how that curve looks. And I'll be talking more about this in some videos dedicated specifically to the audio components. For now, let's go ahead and set this back to logarithmic, and I think 20 meters is going to be just fine for controlling how far away we should be able to hear that sound. So with that, we now have a sound effect that is playing for our fire. And is there anything else you want to throw in, Lee?
Well, yeah, that sound effect, the fire's going to get quiet after about a minute and a half.
Oh, that's true, but I wasn't playing for a minute and a half, so I didn't even realize. Thanks for pointing that out. This sound effect is, as Lee just mentioned, only about a minute and a half long. And then it's going to stop playing, just like the end of a tape or the end of a song on your MP3 player. So what we're going to do is click the loop button, and that just means exactly what it says. It'll just keep looping over and over and over, and we'll have infinite sound. So make sure if you have a sound effect that is supposed to loop, you do check that. So I think with that, we're pretty much wrapped up. We now have a sound effect for our fire, and we are ready to move on.